Hi, welcome to the Center for Nonprofit Resources. I'm Heather Bradley, the director, and we're always delighted when we can invite guests in to share important information about opportunities for you, the nonprofits in our community. Today, I'm delighted to have Artisha Lawson from the Greater Toledo Community Foundation join us. She's a program officer, and she's going to spend a little bit of time talking about an important and new initiative at the foundation in the area of equity and access. Welcome, Artisha.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having me.
So you said you want to pull your PowerPoint up?
So I will go ahead and get started with my presentation. If you have any questions, those of you that have been fortunate to give me some of your time, feel free to drop your questions into the chat box. So my name is Artisha Lawson. I'm a program officer with the Greater Toledo Community Foundation. And the purpose of this discussion is to provide some answers about the application process, to provide some clarification about qualifications, eligibility, and hopefully by the end of this, you will be empowered to submit an application for this initiative. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the Greater Toledo Community Foundation, so let me provide some information about the foundation. Our overall mission of the Greater Toledo Community Foundation, I'm not going to read it entirely, but we work in the area of donor relations. We serve as a catalyst for addressing emerging changes. We provide scholarship and grant opportunities. The program team of the foundation serves as a vessel for the competitive grant opportunity. We guide grant seekers, we assist them with the application, we work with committees, and we also find ways to connect with the community just to provide answers, to address questions, and to ensure that the information is accurate about funds that they're interested in. The foundation serves Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan primarily. And as you can see, there's definitely some leadership affiliated with this fund as well as with the foundation. The document you have on your screen is called the Grant Guideline, which serves as the first document that you should review when you're interested in seeking a grant opportunity, specifically with the equity and access that I hope to spend no more than 10 additional minutes providing some framework as to what we're looking for. So this is a competitive grant opportunity that seeks to proactively address barriers that impact marginalized communities and the populations that they serve. The fund seeks to invest and partner with nonprofits and grassroots associations that actively uplift minority communities in the areas of advocacy, economic development, and employment. The fourth focus area is nonprofit capacity. So what does all that mean? What did I just say? Well, all of that can be answered by viewing the document on your screen called the Grant Guideline. It provides clarification on eligibility, fund priorities, and we have resources that you will receive in an email that serves as a link with research and definitions related to this fund. It doesn't matter if you're a new or experienced grant writer, we will be able to view the content of your application. I do want to take just a few minutes to answer some questions that I've received through some community conversations that I've had. Just provide some more context into the application process. The first step of the application is called the LOI. What are we looking for in an LOI? Well, basically, we want you to put into written form your ideas. Who are you planning to serve? What's your relationship with this population? Do you have any partners that you want to work with? What are the expenses connected to this project? Those are just some of the questions that you will see that you'll have to submit. Once you're writing in your application, we have a few tutorials and resources. Again, I'm going to point you to the resource webpage that has a lot of those. One in particular I'm going to mention is the budget template that can help you with the application, and also an application tutorial on how to complete the application. Some other things you might want to mention in the application is your relationship with the community, some successes you've had, and how you came about with this project concept. So let me explain briefly what are the 4 focus areas. The 4 focus areas are advocacy, economic development, employment, and nonprofit capacity. The first 3, advocacy, economic development, and employment, are all community-facing projects and programs that are provided by your organization. While nonprofit capacity is the internal way that our foundation can invest in your organization. If you have specific questions about what qualifies or what doesn't qualify for one or more of those focus areas, I encourage you to contact me, and we can definitely talk through how your project may or may not align with the focus area, and also some eligible expenses. We can definitely set up a time to talk offline. Generally speaking, we are not prioritizing single events as a project idea. However, if the event is part of a bigger project or program, we can definitely take that under advisement. The fund is seeking to invest at least $15,000 per application at this time. It doesn't matter if you are applying for one focus area or more than one. Just take that under advisement. As I said, the resource webpage will provide a lot of definitions and resources connected to this work. So let me talk about the review process. Who's going to read your application? Well, we have a committee comprised of board members and community leaders that will take time to review your application. That's the first step of the review process. All decisions are ultimately approved by the board, and the timeline is on your screen. If you want to know who those committee members are, I'm going to point you to the webpage that you received in the email. My role as a program officer is to ensure that you have all the information, have answers to your questions associated with this fund. That way you can present the best possible application. In my last few minutes before I open it up for questions, I want to take a moment and explain some of the priorities that we have. And also what we learned in the first round of funding. So I do want to start off by saying that we are in the second round of funding, and the first round grantees exemplify the overall objective of what we were looking for with this fund. They highlighted collaboration, they were uplifting the focus areas, and definitely have relationships in the community. However, we always want to ensure that we're learning as we're surveying. And we learned quite a bit of information from the first round of funding, which did change up some of the focus for this second round. We wanted to make sure that we were connecting with organizations, nonprofits, and grassroots associations that are either all volunteer or have a smaller permanent staffing, by ensuring that they also have enough information and time to submit an application for this fund. We also wanted to connect with grassroots associations in the community to ensure that if a fiscal sponsor is required, we can definitely work with them to provide that type of application process. We also wanted to encourage collaboration, but understand that that is not a requirement for funding this round. However, if you're not considering collaboration, I'm gonna ask why. What's holding you back? How could this collaboration elevate the work in the community? And who will actually benefit the most from a strong collaborative application? Next, we wanted to define proactive. When we say we are seeking requests that proactively address barriers, well, what does that mean? Well, I can tell you that we're looking for projects and programs that have something tangible associated with the request. What does that mean, or how will that work with your program or project? Well, let's talk offline and we can definitely see if this project will align with the fund and the priorities of this fund. Lastly, we wanted to intentionally focus on minority-led, small capacity, and first-time applicant nonprofits and grassroots associations. So you're probably asking, how will you know if my nonprofit qualifies in one of those three categories? Well, within the application, you will have the opportunity to self-identify if your organization is minority-led, maybe has a smaller permanent staffing, and if this is your first time applying for the foundation funds. Once you have selected one of those or more of those categories, you'll be able to explain how you fit into one of those categories. But I can say that, and I'm going to say this again, if you go to the resource webpage, there are plenty of resources that can point you in the right direction of what we're thinking. But what I have been asked, well, what does minority-led mean? What does minority mean? I can say that minority-led and minority is defined by what you see and what you don't see. Of course, race is a factor, but that's not the only factor. We are complex human beings by nature, and therefore you can't just define it by one simple definition. So I just wanted to open this up for any additional questions, and feel free to contact me through one of those means if you want to talk about any specific questions related to your potential application. Thank you, Heather.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions. And again, if you have a question, please enter it in the chat box. So first of all, what do you mean by grassroots organizations?
So grassroots associations, we're also referring to them as grassroots associations, a lot of wordplay, simply means a grassroots collective or group that does not have a 501c3 designation.
Okay, so then that's related to another question. Does an organization need to be a 501c3 organization to be eligible?
Yes. A 501c3 would have to serve as the lead applicant or the fiscal sponsor for the actual approved application. In the case where an organization or grassroots association does not have their 501c3, they would be required to match with a fiscal sponsor in order to receive an approval on their application.
Okay, great. Another question, what is considered a small organization? Is there a budget or an employee benchmark?
So let me preface this by saying that small organization does not mean small impact. We're just talking about the budgetary size of your organization on an annual basis, and also the permanent staffing. There's a lot of organizations that may have a more modest permanent staff of less than 5, and also maybe their budget is around $50,000 or less. That's what we're using as the definition, but I'm referring you to the webpage for additional information that can point you in the right direction.
Great. And we know that there's a whole continuum of people with experience. Some, this is their first experience with GTCF. What is an LOI?
LOI, well, believe it or not, there's actual two different definitions of LOI. So don't feel confused if you're not sure which one. So there's letter of intent and letter of inquiry. Either one, you're not going to be faulted for saying either one, but the LOI is the first stage of the application process.
Okay, so a two-step process. I think you highlighted that. Yep. When will the payouts for this grant be made?
Well, the payouts we're looking for would happen in the first quarter. We're looking at possibly early April as the latest that final determinations would be received to those that are approved for funding.
Okay. Another question, will this funding be available after this round or year?
That is a very interesting question. At this point, I'm gonna have to defer that question for a later time because I am not 100% sure. At this point that we're recording this is only a 2-round funding opportunity. So this is the second round of funding.
Great. So I think that's all the questions we have right now. Just because a lot of things came up in this conversation, I'm going to share my screen and share some resources that are available through the center that are related. So we know that particularly when we're looking at collaborations, we can have large organizations combined with new organizations. And we know people tell us it can be intimidating. If you're in a grassroots organization, what does evaluation mean? Or I'm not really familiar with grant writing. So again, we'll make sure these links are in the email. There's a 101 Fundamentals series. This is a curated library of no cost video-based training, and anyone can go anytime and just click on one of these links and you can watch the video on demand. I think the shortest one is 10 minutes and the longest one is an hour. So as you can see, there's a lot of great information there. I also want to highlight that through the center, there are a variety of live events, also independent learning and certificate programs. And in particular, we have a new great relationship with a group called Mind Edge. And for example, you can purchase some courses in the area of introduction to grant writing, for example, and that's 5 hours worth of work. So lots of options around professional development. I also want to highlight, we never know where these opportunities are going to go. There is a Strategic Alliance Partnership grant that helps facilitate groups when they want to come together. And it's a really broad definition of strategic alliance, everything from merger to umbrella organizations, sharing back office, brick and mortar, and staff, et cetera. You can learn more from the grant guidelines. You notice we refer you a lot to the grant guidelines, but there are a couple of tools out here. Sometimes it can be hard when you're starting up these conversations and you need a little bit of framework. So there's a collaboration work plan worksheet that you can download that's in a PDF format. There's also a partnerships framework. It's a little more elaborate, but this is a really, really good resource around thinking about the framework, developing the framework of working together. And finally, this came up in a previous brown bag, and we touched on it briefly, fiscal sponsorship. So I also just want to highlight, when you're on our website, if you just start typing in a concept, it's an artificial intelligence, it will pull up the related material. And if you're not familiar with fiscal sponsorship, if you're not a 501c3 or you're not really sure which direction to go, this is something to consider. And there's an infographic that really does a great job of exploring some of the basics that was created by the National Council for Nonprofits. So you can download that infographic. So those are some examples, I think, related to this work that might be helpful, especially for some of the first-time grant seekers that will be in our audience. So let me check the chat box one more time. I don't see it. Last call. I don't see any more questions. Okay, well, Artisha, I really want to thank you for spending time with our nonprofit community. It's always great when experts like yourself can come and help people understand these opportunities that can help increase the impact of our nonprofits. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Great.